2 years ago, my boyfriend, our best friend, and myself all attended a Halloween party for a college we did not go to. We knew very few people at this party, and at the time of this event they had all either left or passed out drunk. People tend to get way too trashed way too early in the night. College kids do not live up to their partying reputation, because as this story progresses, understand that everyone in this story is probably way too inhibited for their own good, aside from my boyfriend, friend, and I, who drink fairly often. The odd dynamic that probably escalated this situation is that my boyfriend and I really don't express PDA, and when I showed up with other male friends of mine, people don't necessarily think I have a date at the party. However, I tend to be pretty standoffish to people I don't know and take pride in disengaging attitude that I feel prevents creepy encounters. I am not an easy target. This story is about Muhammad, the host of this party. We arrive at and find him outside, sitting and talking with a girl. As we approach, she leaves him there. Muhammad tells us that he was just rejected by a girl. We pick him up and give him the plenty fish in the sea talk and try not to let it dampen the party. Muhammad takes this as an invitation. Since that moment, he has taken every chance he can to put his arms across my shoulders, getting offended when I brush him off and following us from room to room. Muhammad is absolutely trashed before we even start drinking, so we were hyper-focused on his attempts. We are still just trying to party, so every time he followed us, we would just leave the room, only for him to tag along only a few seconds later. Our suspicion is confirmed when we are gathering information on our beloved host. We find the girl who had rejected him earlier. She tells us that she had never met him before, and before we had showed up, he had tried to kiss her, and she was relieved when we interrupted. Other partygoers were questioned about his behavior simply said, "Oh, that's Muhammad when he's drunk." My boyfriend and I started kissing sloppily as a defense mechanism, so that Muhammad knows that I am a lady who is spoken for, and I have a boyfriend to watch my back every time I go to the bathroom, so I would not be concerned. Muhammad is continuing to drink heavily. My boyfriend and I still having a good time, but making plans to leave. We intend to drink the place dry before we go, just to spite our rude hosts. We're assholes, we know. So he and I plant ourselves on the couch together with a bottle of JMO. Muhammad, he has a full cap of beer. Muhammad, with a full beer, can barely make words. He points to the bottle. I hesitate giving it to him for obvious reasons. He gestures again in a foreign language. Muhammad grabs his bottle of whiskey and dumps it in his beer. He goes to take a satisfied slurp and spills half the contents into his lap. Party foul. When he realizes all of the attention is on him, he stumbles away. We decide that it's time to leave. In the calm of the storm, my boyfriend and I are in the basement alone, laughing and draining the keg set up there before we make our escape. Lo and behold, Muhammad stumbles down, barely coherent. My boyfriend suggests we just make our way past the stairs and leave, like we had been doing all night. Muhammad has other ideas. I step 1 foot up the stairs, and his drunk ass puts his arm on my shoulder across the front of my body to prevent me from leaving. Big no-no. My boyfriend and I have been the most easygoing, non-confrontational people all night, and we have had enough. This has to stop, is all my boyfriend said before Muhammad lunged at him, and then they began brawling. Muhammad, being the more physically inhibited, is not landing any blows, but is too drunk to feel pain. So it takes a bit of struggling for my boyfriend to restrain him on the ground. I yell that he better fucking stay there until we leave, and we proceed up the stairs to inform his friends where he is. On the first floor of the house, trying to collect ourselves, Muhammad emerges from the basement, and he is pissed off. He is completely incoherent, and no one can talk any sense into him. The scariest part about this was his eyes, completely bloodshot and void of any awareness. He goes after my boyfriend and catches me in between them, so my boyfriend and I are trying desperately to fend him off together while all the sleeping drunks are waking up from the screaming. He finally subsides, and my boyfriend and I fly out the door into the street, leaving the door wide open behind us. The weirdest part being that, as we left, the other partygoers were yelling, Dude, where are you going?" Muhammad says, "I love her." The partiers remind him, "You don't have her. So, Muhammad, for your own sake, let's not meet again." I was 10 years old, lived in the deep south. Me and my parents lived in the woods, in a little house a couple of miles away from the tiny town where I grew up. To get to our house, you turn down a paved road, travel approximately a mile, and we lived in the woods down a short dirt road to the left. There were other homes sort of nearby, but the woods separated all of us, so there was a lot of privacy. It was summer. I was bored because until I learned to drive, my summers were incredibly boring. My mom was not sociable, so I only had company or visited rarely, and we went to church and we went shopping once a week in the nearest major city. But other than that, me and my mom just stayed home alone. In this little town, most people didn't even lock their doors. It was and still is probably one of the safest towns in America. So in the summer, we would have the doors and windows open, nothing locked, never dreaming that our safety could be threatened. One day my uncle, his wife, and 3 kids showed up. His kids were in my age range, and I was ecstatic. My mom never looked forward to these visits. She was just not very sociable, and our house was tiny. The kids had to camp out in the living room. She knew my uncle was coming, but he wasn't due for another couple of weeks, but for some reason he decided to show up early. It was a summer evening. Me and my 3 cousins were out running around the yard playing like kids do. When my cousins got to arguing, my uncle was in the living room. He called them in and made them sit down for a while until they could learn to behave. I stayed outside and practiced cartwheels, something I was desperately trying to learn before school started back. I noticed that this big guy came walking into the yard. I didn't really look him in the face. He walked by me, and I stopped what I was doing and curiously staring. No one visits us much, and usually they drove up in the yard, and it was usually family. He walked up on our porch and knocked on the screen door. My mother came to the door, and he told her that he was lost. He said he was staying with some people and he wasn't from here, and he went to the store with them and they drove off and left him, and he didn't know how to get back to their house. My mom told him that she would call this lady that lived down the road from us and asked if her teenage sons would drive down and pick him up and help him get back to where he was staying. My mom left him standing on the porch and walked away to make the phone call, and he did something that I thought was a little strange. He opened the screen door and stuck his head in, looking around. Of course, he saw my uncle, who was this big, strong, stocky guy sitting on the couch. My mom called this lady. Her boys drove up and got him pretty quickly, and he was gone. We didn't think much of it until my uncle and family left, because we were too busy and I was having fun. But after my uncle's family left, at the end of the week, we found some things out. We found out that this guy was not lost at all. A relative that lived at the end of the road, where you turn off to head towards our house, said he saw the guy walk past his house 2 or 3 days in a row, and then he would walk back by. Then the lady whose sons gave the guy a ride, she called my mom a few days after this happened, and she said he told her sons exactly how to get to where he was staying. She also told my mom that me and her needed to stay in the house and keep the doors locked because this young man was up to no good. I believe that he had been watching and saw a petite woman and a little girl home alone all day with the doors unlocked and unassuming danger. Anyway, I've always wished my mother would have asked these boys' mother why she felt that this guy was dangerous to us. Creepy stranger who came into our yard that day, let's not meet again. Back when I was a kid, my mom and I had a deal. She'd schedule all of my scarier appointments like the dentist visits and vaccines in the morning, and if I went out whining and fussing too much, I'd get to play hooky for the rest of the school day, and we'd get lunch, go to the mall, and see a movie. This was one of those days. It was a few weeks before Christmas, but the mall was pretty quiet, because it was around 1 p.m. on a work day. I'd had a picture taken with Santa, we had done some Christmas shopping, and had lunch at my favorite restaurant, and we were going to finish off our day with whatever kids' Christmas movie was playing at the time. I don't remember which one it was, but I remember how fun and pleasant the day had been. The theater itself was almost empty, just my mom and I, and a few parents, with kids too young to be in school. A few minutes later, a single man walked in. I remember him entering because I thought it was weird that he didn't have any kids with him, and he seemed to spend a lot of time surveying the theater, the way people do when they are trying to find a seat or two in a crowded auditorium. I remember him staring at me for quite a while, but then he sat down near the door, and I didn't think too much about it. A girl I played with in my neighborhood had really strict parents, and they always went to see kids' movies alone first to be sure they approved of them. Maybe his kids went to school with me and he recognized me, and that was why his eyes had lingered. Just as the preview started, I realized I needed to pee. I had just turned 8 a few months earlier, and my mom was finally to let me do things like that without accompanying me. As I got up to go, my mom slipped to me $10 and told me to get us some candy and soda, a real treat in my house. I was so excited to be able to go by myself and to get candy. I almost didn't notice when the man from earlier got up and followed closely behind me as I left the theater. Almost as I was allowed to do things by myself more, my parents had drilled into me that I always needed to be aware of my surroundings and everything that felt off. And the way he bolted from his seat to follow me out of the theater felt off. To give a little context, the movie theater was attached to the mall, so the main entrance was through the mall itself. To make getting out a little easier, there were a few exit-only doors that led to the parking lot. The restrooms were right next to these. The man followed me all the way to the women's bathroom, not close enough to immediately spook me, but close enough that any passerby would assume he was a father tailing behind his daughter. After I got to the restroom, I peeked out. He had stationed himself just outside the entrance to the bathroom on the side closest to the exit. I told myself that maybe he needed to use the bathroom too, but he clearly didn't. So I peed and then waited and waited. I heard a man's voice just outside joke with someone about how he was waiting for his daughter while he was dawdling. I knew my mom wouldn't get worried and come look for me immediately because she would assume I was in line to get snacks, but I couldn't get back to her without going past the man. Finally, a nice-looking older woman came in. As she was leaving, I told her I'd forgotten how to get back to the theater where my mom was waiting, and asked if she could walk me there. I held her hand tightly as she cheerfully told me she was glad to help. As we left, the man waiting took a quick step forward, like he had been waiting to grab me. When I saw that I was with the woman, he turned around and left out the exit door. I made it back to my mom without incident. I told her I didn't see any candy I wanted, and I was kind of full from lunch anyway. In hindsight, I should have told her right away about the creepy guy who followed me, but I was afraid that I'd lose my precious new independence. But looking back as an adult, I still can't figure out any benign intentions that would explain his actions, and I desperately hope that he didn't catch some other little girl unaware. I once met up with an old friend, a friend I had known for a few years prior to the meetup in November 2017. I'd actually met this person on a dating site. However, as time went on, the relationship between us became strictly platonic. There were no red flags, but my gut did warn me, so I completely trusted this person. We met up in town, behind a bus station on a grassy hill surrounded by trees and a tall wall. Our meeting was just to have a smoke, get a little high, and to have some catch-up. The meetup was fine. I had actually started smoking weed a few months before, so I was still relatively new to it. He had brought something new for me to try. I wasn't at all anxious about trying it, as I completely trusted this person, and would never believe that he would try to hurt me. He packed a full blunt for me, but I only managed to smoke a quarter of the blunt. He spoke during this time about work, our previous relationships, and random stuff. About a half an hour later, I started to feel extremely lightheaded and anxious. I suddenly had this strange feeling where I did not feel comfortable at all, and I really wanted to go home. When I asked him if I could go home, he offered to take me home, but I said no, it's okay. He offered again, please, let me take you home. You'll be safe with me. I wouldn't hurt you. I shook my head and said, no thank you. I can take myself home. I felt like I was walking on a cloud. My head became dizzy, and my eyesight was a little blurry. I had never felt like this before, and in time, I started to panic. When we made it our way down the hill towards the bus station, as there were a lot of people around, so if anything happened, someone would step in, I became extremely terrified of him. I had this horrible feeling in my gut that told me to get away from him, and when I got to the bus station, I told him I would call my taxi here and go home. His tone was no longer nice, but very stern. I'm going to take you home, now. And he began to pull off my jacket. I told him no, and that I was going home on my own. He pulled my jacket harder, and I fell against him. He pulled me in to him and told me that I did not need to be scared of him. But I was so terrified. At this point, I started to feel very paranoid, and I couldn't see properly. I pushed him away from me and rubbed my eyes and called for a taxi. He tried to pull my phone from me and yell in my face, do you even listen? I'm taking you home. I noticed a few people had stopped and asked if I was okay. All I remember is that I wanted to go home. So, a lady kindly called a taxi for me and waited with me, made sure that I was okay, and helped me into the taxi. During the time I waited for the taxi, he kept trying to get me to come to his car with him. But the lady that looked after me told him to go home, and that she was going to take me home instead. So he left. When I got home, I gave the taxi driver money and told him to keep the change. I didn't want to wait around. I just wanted to get into my bed because at the time, it is the only place I would feel and be safe from harm. That evening, I laid in my bed for 5 hours straight staring at the ceiling. I don't remember if I thought about anything, or if my mom came in at any time. I just remember laying in bed doing nothing until the paranoia and sickly feeling began to wear off. I remember looking at my phone and seeing I had 32 missed calls from him, 10 voicemails, and 50 plus messages. The messages were weird. He had sent me around 20 messages just asking where I was, and when I got home, and in one of the voicemails, he had told me how he had this fantasy of taking me home whilst drugged up and tying me up. He wanted to blindfold me, and he wanted me to submit myself to him. I freaked out and blocked him on all social media, Instagram, Snapchat, Discord, and I blocked his number. Before the blocking, I told him if he ever contacted me again, then I would call the police. I heard nothing from him for a month until I received a text from an unknown number asking me how I was. I hadn't given my number to anyone, so I ignored it. Then I received another message a few minutes later saying they missed me and that they would like to see me soon. I asked who they were. No reply. Nothing. So creepy person who pretended to be my friend, let's not meet again. I've spoken to some friends with regards to my story, and all of them have explained that the weed would never make anyone feel this way, and a lot of them think I was given spice, not weed. Spice looks a lot like weed, but the effects are a lot stronger and more dangerous. A few years ago, I went to Vancouver for work, and a friend of mine who lived nearby came and stayed with me one night, so we could go out to the bar. Neither of us knew the city well, so we went to the pub next door to my hotel. We are having drinks and a hockey game is on, so my friend starts chatting about the game with a cute guy at the table next to us. The table had about 4 or 5 20-something-year-old guys there, and we were chatting with them and having a good time. I'm married and made that clear from the beginning, but my friend was single and was loving the attention and flirting from one guy in particular. The game ends and people are clearing out of the pub. The guys say they were going to a party nearby and we should come. I don't want to go, but my friend does. Most of the guys get into one car and leave. And the one who was most interested in talking to us and his quiet, considerably more drunk friends stay behind because the other car is full, and offered to take a taxi with us. My friend is really into this guy and insists she wants to go to this stupid party, so I relent and agree. When we get to this beautiful, huge house about 10 minutes away, and there is no one there, all the lights were off, I ask where the party is, and he says his friends are on their way. We walk inside, and it looks like a staging house. New, modern furniture, generic artwork on the walls, no personal photos anywhere. Alarm bells are ringing in my head. My friend then gets annoyed with me asking him so many questions, and tells me to knock it off. He offers us a drink, and I ask for coffee. I kept joking like, do the real owners of this house have coffee? Do you know where to find it? He wants to give my friend a tour of upstairs, and I give her a serious look. So I say, I'll just have a seat in the living room, where his drunk friend has been slightly slumped in a chair since we walked in. My friend and the guy go upstairs. I'm sitting here panicking, wondering what to do. I don't know where we are, so I don't even know what to tell a taxi. And I don't know the taxi numbers to call one in the first place. I decide to use my GPS to find out roughly what addresses we are at, and I Google a taxi company nearby and call a taxi immediately. Tell them I don't know the address of the house, and to just park on the street and call me when they arrive. I will walk down to meet them. Then I go upstairs, burst into the bedroom, and tell my friend we are leaving right now, and a taxi is on the way. Of course, the guy protests, and my friend is frustrated and wants to sleep with the guy, but she sees the fear on my face and begrudgingly agrees. I have no idea what was actually going on with the house, or what he had planned, but I'm so glad my idiot friend finally listened to me. Oh, and we were there for about 30 minutes total. His friends never showed up, and I don't think we were ever going to go to that party.
Alright, if you enjoyed the video, go ahead, like, share, subscribe, share on Facebook, share on Twitter, share on Instagram. I don't give a shit where you share it, just share it. Thank you for watching.